our first slate was full of searing insight. I think we're set up for the same for this second half. So I'm going to just say this so everybody just remember. So Eric, you're up first. Jessica, Steve, Narendra, and Hannah is the current order we have. So if you get for when you're up, we've got 5 instead of 6. So we're gonna keep you to the 5 minutes. But if you go over a little bit, that's fine. And we'll get started. So our first presentation of the second half is my friend Eric Leslie. So Eric is an organizer, an educator, a grassroots systems builder, an innovator, and I think a fierce advocate for civic participation and social capital. So we've talked a lot about capital, haven't dove into social capital yet. And he's the founder of Union Capital, which is a Massachusetts-based initiative, and it's designed to transform that social capital into opportunity, equity, and lasting community power. Eric, I'm so glad you're here. Take it away.
Really appreciate you thinking of me and inviting and the honor and recognition for this. So great to be with you and everybody looking forward to the presentations. I will jump in because I know I'm on the clock. Look, there's been a lot of research that's impressively measured the value and benefit of this hard to quantify thing called social capital. But communities that have higher rates of volunteerism, public meeting attendance, and helping of neighbors have statistically significant higher rates of job growth and voter participation, irrespective of socioeconomic status of that community. So it seems that things such as getting jobs and voting may not be the be all end all, but they're pretty good temperature checks of the health and vibrancy of a community. That if we want to have a community where people are getting jobs, voting, financial improvement, mental health outcomes, and all these other factors, instead of focusing on those end outcomes, which are very important, we could have organizations registering people to vote and getting people jobs. Our model organization, what if we built an organization that focused on how do we support, facilitate, encourage people volunteering, helping their neighbors, and participating in public meetings? And so that's what we set out to do. And as Matt mentioned in the intro, our mission is to transform social capital into opportunity by flipping this idea of its head that we reward community and civic engagement. Our vision is that ongoing community collaboration cultivates equity for all. What we've done and built over the last 11 years in Boston, Massachusetts, and also in Springfield, Mass, where I am today, is we designed and created what we call the UC Rewards app. Members are invited through word of mouth, through community organizations and institutions that we partner with to sign up for a rewards app like a coffee or shoppers card or frequent flyer program. That's the cost of membership is signing up. There's no barrier to entry. And you're invited into community spaces as well as network night events and gatherings that we host and facilitate, and to participate in leadership training to then run and own and lead these spaces as well as your own programs. And with it, you earn a little bit of reward. There's an incentive to get involved. It's not that we're paying you, but that on average, you can earn about $200 a year on a Visa gift card for the time that you take to strengthen community, for the hours that you spend volunteering, helping your neighbors, attending public meetings, and in so doing, can earn a maximum of $500 a year in which you're not taxed. We don't need Social Security numbers. It's on a Visa gift card. So it's not developing wealth. Our mission and work isn't that closes any type of wealth gaps or equity, but the money is a means to a greater end, and that you're getting into these spaces and using our tools to access resources, and I think even more powerfully, build relationships. Those relationships result in individual opportunity advancement, leadership initiatives, and as we've been able to measure as well, connected, engaged, resilient communities. What this looks like for a quick snapshot, this is our app screen. We partner with organizations. We put up banner ads. You earn points. When you reach the bronze level, you get a $25 Visa card, and the silver level, a $75 card. And you get access to a calendar of events, of programs that this is from last week in Springfield, of workshops and activities that are free and open to the public, as well as our own programs that you can check into. And you can also self-report that you went to a meeting, that you volunteered, you were part of a political rally or voter engagement. You enter in the details, you're in 100 points an hour. And this data adds up powerfully. This is a snapshot of our Boston membership base, where we've been for 11 years, in which we have close to 3,000 members that in the first half of this year alone logged just about 100,000 hours of this community engagement. And as a result, we're awarded over $110,000 on these Visa gift cards at a multitude of events and programs through the organizations we partner with, such as Boston Public Schools and community health centers and financial wellness programs, as well as our own nights and gatherings. And then we measure what actually happens, just like the studies and research say it should happen. Our members get jobs. We are able to track when they join to every December when we survey, measurable improvements in full-time employment, declines in unemployment, knowledge of credit score and improvement of credit score, financial wellness, gradual increases in college degree attainment, but also equally important, voter participation.
Yes,
And is that my
I
time?
was just
You're good. Sorry. It was just an unmuted
Oh,
participant. Go
okay.
ahead.
No problem. And so
30
turn,
seconds.
how much seconds?
30 seconds.
Perfect. Uh, our members are pretty active before joining, but get even more so and become more civically involved, not only in voting, but in leading and creating, getting entrepreneurial funding and training from us and access to our network to launch their own programs and initiatives to have a sense of agency and opportunity that they can contribute and give back while also gaining. So they come to network night and get a hot meal and have childcare, but and learn about resources and programs and get a reward. But they also bring their knowledge, their expertise, their clothing to donate, their friendships and relationships that build our collective power. So thanks for the opportunity to share about it.
Eric, thank you so much. Folks, if you are in Boston or Springfield, please go to a Union Capital event. They just feel different in the most beautiful way. I can't explain it more than that. And I'm so happy that Eric is being followed by Dr. Gordon Nebhard because she is a political economist, professor, advisor, author, one of these people here who does everything, a leading scholar on issues ranging from cooperative economics, economic justice, racial justice, and community-based development, particularly in the African American communities. She brings this historical depth and strategic clarity to basically what we're talking, efforts to reimagine economic systems from the ground up. Perfect follow-up to Eric's talk. Welcome, Jessica.
thanks so much. I really uh appreciate it. Can you see my screen? So I want to talk about transformation through worker co-ops, and I will talk a little fast. I am a New Yorker. Um, and we only have 5 minutes. So I also want to make sure we acknowledge the stewards of the land, original stewards. I acknowledge our ancestors, Mother Earth, thanks to the organizers. So human beings in every era of history, on every continent, practice solidarity, economics, mutual aid, and economic cooperation. These are strategies and practices older than capitalism that enable people to work together to survive and to thrive. And I contend that human beings' first economic system was cooperative economics, a cooperative system. And so I try to remind people, right, that it's in our DNA, it's part of being human, and that capitalism is actually more alien. And if we think about that, we can help. For Black and Brown people in the USA, cooperative economic organizing has been a means of collective survival and asserting and affirming our humanity, especially in economics. Black Americans, for example, have established cooperative enterprises in order to sustain their communities, feed their families, own land, control their work lives, and share what they've created, all in the face of racial economic exploitation and exclusion. In my book, Collective Courage, I delve deeply into these histories, and I've documented dozens of examples of Black co-ops showing survival, resistance, prosperity, etc., through economic cooperation. I want to focus the rest of my minutes on two important benefits of worker cooperatives, which is a really underutilized economic structure and practice. So the first takeaway I hope you get is how worker co-ops achieve and transcend economic goals. They thus have potential to transform agricultural, manufacturing, and unionized industries, as well as service industries. And so it's a model that we should understand better and use more. And then the second piece, which is actually I've become quite passionate about, is the ways that worker co-ops transform work through self-management and economic democracy. And I'll give you one specific example of how worker owners develop social capital and leadership capacity and achieve psychosocial humanist development through their ownership of a business with other people. So let me quickly get to that. This was a poster about what co-ops achieve, but I'm going to talk to you specifically about what worker co-ops achieve. Case studies, interviews, and surveys find that there are many benefits: increased productivity, better working conditions, better pay with benefits, more control over work and the work rules, more job ladder mobility, asset building. We have less employment turnover. Worker co-ops increase, as I said, social capital and civic engagement. So another way to do what we just heard about. They develop multiple types of leadership, which hopefully one of my examples will show you that. They help to stabilize communities, recirculate resources multiple times in the same community. There's less coercion, more self-management, communication, and teamwork. That results in productivity improvements. Studies also find higher levels of training in worker cooperatives, and also worker cooperatives are often started in order to meet and address community needs like elder care, child care, healthy food, green industries, and or to protect jobs. I came to better understand solidarity economies and cooperative economics as humanist economics when I was interviewing formerly incarcerated men about their experiences as co-op owners while in prison, operating what we call incarcerated worker co-ops. And these interviews I did were in Puerto Rico with members of Cooperative Aragos, Cooperativa de Servicio Aragos. Before the COVID pandemic, there were actually 5 incarcerated worker co-ops in various prisons in Puerto Rico.
30 seconds.
Incarcerated people themselves, 30 seconds? Oh, God. Okay. Somehow I had timed this to 5 minutes. But anyway, let me finish about
You're good. You're good, Jeff.
Cooperative Aragos, and then I'll go, and then I'll stop. I had one other example I won't give. So they demanded co-op education because they wanted to start a co-op business with selling their art. They were able to do that, change the law so that incarcerated people were allowed to be worker co-op members. And then they went on and trained other people to do solar panel technology, a cafe, and the women's prison had a sewing prison. And the men from this co-op trained the other people. They have very low recidivism rates, and they talked very much about how the co-op transformed their lives. This is one of the quotes from one of the guys I interviewed. And I just want to finish by saying, right, the transformation, the spiritual transformation turned out to be more important in my interviews than the economic benefits. And so they felt like being able to own and control their own business while in prison just changed their whole attitude, their whole behavior, in addition to giving them better, better income than slave labor they were doing in prison. And so it's not surprising that a study in Italy found that cities with the most worker co-ops had the highest measures of economic well-being, health, general satisfaction, and political efficacy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. 5 minutes is unkind, and I think our 2 presentations really highlighted 2 models, not only that help give an alternative to existing capitalist models, but also have all these spillover effects that are really powerful. And now our next speaker, Stephen Keen, I think is most famous for critiquing and debunking mainstream economic theories and understanding all of the and critiquing those common understandings. Steve is an educator, a fierce advocate for reimagining our global economic frameworks and relationships. Research focuses on complex systems, modeling of financial instability and debt deflation dynamics, critiques of neoclassical economics. And I think we can blame him for correctly predicting the 2008 financial crisis, but failing to convince us all to quickly change our ways. Steve, we're so privileged to have you here.
Steve, you're muted.
Okay. This is more on how to analyze the economy than on how to change it. And a huge focus globally is we can't afford to do it if we haven't got the money. And this is I'm focusing on global warming in this particular presentation, but it's based on the way that economists, and I use the word pretend advisedly, they don't do research to say banks operate, and they say banks are what they call financial intermediaries. So they don't actually lend, they introduce a saver to a borrower, and the borrower does the borrowing from the saver. And they also pretend government works the same way. The government has to borrow from households in order to spend, and so on. And therefore, government surpluses save money, deficits are borrowing money. Now, that's completely wrong. When you do the accounting, and I'll show you that in a moment, you find banks create money. They don't borrow it. They don't act as intermediaries, and the deficit actually creates money as well, and surpluses destroy it, the opposite of what the mainstream thinks. So the textbook models that are taught to students, and they believe them to the day they die, unfortunately, most of them, use supply and demand diagrams. Now, banks don't lend using intersecting lines. They use double entry bookkeeping, and I've invented a software package called Ravel that lets you see that. And when I put the vision that economists have about banks being intermediaries, what happens is that banks don't actually lend, but households lend to firms, households lend to government, and what's going on is a shuffling of existing money from one account to another. Now, nothing actually happens on the asset side in this vision of lending. And the government is then required to sell bonds when it borrows, when it spends. This is a basic flowchart mathematics showing that government's required to issue bonds equal to the interest on existing bonds plus the deficit. That's the requirement people have. Now, if you simulate this model, the textbook model, you do get the crisis that people expect is going to happen if we don't eliminate the deficit. Debt ratios go through the roof, interest payments become utterly unsustainable. Clearly, long before you reach the levels that this chart finally shows, people would stop lending to the government, and that would be the breakdown that Musk in particular fears. But it's a myth. It's not the real world. And the Bank of England said so, echoing what I've been saying and other non-orthodox economists have been saying for a century. Banks are not intermediaries. They create money when they make a loan. So within a minute, I can change the model that I'm showing on screen now to one where the banks actually originate, and that one happens then a whole lot of operations that are only on the liability and equity side of the table from the conventional textbook model turn up on both the assets and the liability side. And what that means is that operations create and destroy money. So if the government spends, it creates money. If it taxes, it destroys money. And the bond operations, what everybody worries about, bond operations actually don't access money or change the amount of money. They change the assets that back the money that's been created by the government in the first place. There's no borrowing involved in selling bonds. All of this sounds totally counterintuitive, and it is. It's about the same thing as stopping to believe that the Earth is the center of the universe and realize that we orbit around the sun. It's literally that level of change in the understanding of economics. Now, when I simulate the model with the real world, with absolutely no changes to the rest of the model, then I find multiple differences. GDP grows because the money supply is growing, turning over more rapidly, and the debt ratio stabilizes because, as well as creating more debt, you're creating more money, which creates more economic activity. The whole thing reaches a stable position in the long term. Now, this matters to me now dramatically because when climate change hits, and I don't say if anymore, it's when, we will need to attack the damage we've done in the same way we attacked the Nazis in World War II, and that was by government money creation. Unfortunately, we have a bunch of morons in charge of government policy who don't realise the government creates money, so their inability to understand what happens in the current system means they're going to hamper us when we start trying to work on the real system. We have to get rid of them, frankly. And I'm trying, if people realised how bad their work was, they would be caught up in their own Nuremberg trial for ecocide, which is what they're actually causing. So
30
I
seconds.
cover a lot. If you want to find more background, there's never enough time in these 5 minutes. Any of those links will take you to my work on how to actually properly understand the economy. And the bottom one is to get a copy of my software so you can see it for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. And I put in the chat a direct link to Ravel, the Goldilocks program for data, one of your Substack arguments. Awesome. Really, as we think at the global level, and resonated that we need to get rid of them.
Thank you. Yeah.
Really appreciate it. Okay. Next up, we have Narendra
Oh,
Paul,
Steve, you
who
can
is,
unshare.
Oh, pardon me, I thought I'd stopped.
that's all
Okay, yeah.
right.
No worries.
Just you can share over
Narendra,
the. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
that's all right. I'll continue to introduce. Narendra is a facilitator, organizational leader, and fierce advocate for equipping citizens to become informed decision makers in profound systems change. So he brings, I think, 4 decades, we decided, of grassroots experience, wisdom, and insight to conversations on development, equity, and systems change. He is a senior leader at the Chinimaya Organization for Rural Development, CORD, where he's worked for 40 years in 6 Indian states and more than 1,200 villages. So happy to have you.
Thank you, Matt. The idea, what for 4 decades, what we are doing in the community, especially in India, in rural Indias, which constitute almost like 65% of the total population of the country. Here, in this context, what we have noticed that until honest, we are not able to bring people to the center stage of the development. I think there are many things which are top down. They may be like appears in numbers and many ways working well, but there are many challenges because the diversity and the need and the context at the bottom of the pyramid is totally very different. So what approach CORE took is basically to household based approach, and again women focused. So we in a month time period we work with almost like we organized 100,000 women in almost like 2,000 community-based organization, and then we are reaching out to their families, to their children, to work on all diverse issues of their life. The comprehensive nature of this program, focus take as a unit, which is administrative and constitution unit, is a cluster of villages known as a Gram Panchayat. So we took that as a approach because that way we are supplementing, complementing the government effort, and it's a constitutional body. So very much there is a huge acceptance from the government and for the active participation space for the people and especially women. This comprehensive model is able to translate 13 out of 17 sustainable development goal into action. And as a macrocosm, if we look into India, we have almost like 272,000 gram panchayats. CORD is working 300 gram panchayats as a model. So here again, we say it's knowing is not doing, doing is doing. So what are the possible basically action or model which can help to build a more functional and fair economy in this situation? As I mentioned, it's a constitutional model, so we are not doing anything parallel to the or something which is just for the advocacy sake or just organizing people of some sake. I'll take few examples. Like we need to practice decentralized and bottom-up systems of the government and the governance in a true intent and spirit, which is there provided by the constitution. And we need to educate people, make them aware, and organize them through the community-based organization. And again, the women are the key player here. So automatically gender equity and many other issues related to gender are addressed there. And once we are able to do that, so people are actively able to participate on diverse issues, maybe include the school management committee kind of thing to improve the education, village health, sanitation, nutrition committees, and the people are active participant with while maintaining the rural diversity and enriching the rural prosperity in rural ways instead of just coping, finding out the different models. And another what we noticed is that there is a shift from the welfare to the empowerment development, which is we need to go beyond the right-based development. I mean, we have a 100 days non-skilled labor work for each household in country, which is known as National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. But again, there the idea of this, the intent and spirit, which is again brought by the people based on the need of the community. But what happens that it just become a more of the labor wage oriented work for the people, not with the true intent of it, where the livelihood base has to broaden, the people has to be, the land has to be improved, the water scenario has to be improved. So people are just focusing the labor and wages. So what we believe is, and what we have seen with the people, that we need to be engaged people productively in work where they're generating. So both hands need to have job which is productive, not just receiving the subsidy or freebies. There are multiple parallel institutions which are more, the cost is huge. So we need to have a convergent model which are addressing directly to the family and the communities through this local self-governance model of the Gram Panchayats, so that we can bring the people to the center stage through their active participation, integrating all issues of their life, and ensuring sustainability so that people stand on their feet. And a lot of network they are able to do with the multiple system and structures which are for them.
30 seconds.
And yeah, so legislation they are there, but like there is a huge land disparity, which is like mostly 80% of the farmers are marginal and small farmers. So there, what we need to do, and the 80% of people own the 20% of land, and 20% people own the 80% of land. So huge disparity. I mean, the idea should be then title of the being a farmer is a land ownership. So we need to have not the person who own a land, but he is not doing farming. So those kind of things. And ultimately, one more important thing, the scientific or the policy making community need also to be more responsible. Like we have a green revolution example, or the climate change, or the what we are thinking the post SDG 2030 in the country like India. So those areas we definitely need to kind of bring people to the center stage and ensure their active participation in this whole process through the model which we call the Gram Panchayat based model. Thank you.
Thank you, Narendra. I know we were emailing the challenge of taking 40 years of your life's work into 5 minutes, but you did a great job. So last for today, we have Dr. Hannah Thomas. And I think Hannah has the rare distinction of being both a world-class researcher, but also an experienced community developer and a public policy expert. And that expertise is focused primarily on equitable community development that spans the fields of housing and guaranteed income, workforce development, the racial wealth gap, community development finance, mortgages, and asset building. I know her best through her work as the co-lead of the cash assistance evaluation portfolio at Apt Global. Hannah, I'm so glad that you are here with us.
Hannah, you're muted.
Hi, I'm trying to get my screen to present, so give me, I don't know quite why it's not working. And, but hi everyone, while I try and figure that out, let me see if I can, okay, share, I can just share. Why, there's a button that I have to press somewhere that I cannot find.
You may need to expand your window. If it's a small Zoom window, if you expand it, it'll show you more options at the bottom.
There we go. All right, here we go. Thank you very much. That was the secret. Okay, let's see if I can get this now to. All right, here we go. Hi. Thanks, everyone. I'm using up half of my minute just trying to get the technology working. Thank you for the kind of introduction, Matt. And what I would love to talk to you about today is kind of coming from a little bit from where I sit. I sit, as Matt said, both between kind of the world of research and implementation, but also I'm a sociologist who studies economics and come with sort of some big questions around what are the narratives that inform a lot of our economic policy and how we interpret data. And I want to talk about this in the context of guaranteed income. So if we look at and we think about the kinds of questions and narratives and how those inform how we think about what data we're going to collect, but also how we ask and think about the analysis and the questions that we ask of the data, it starts to become a little bit clearer, some of what we've seen in some of the other talks just in this past half an hour, where we might be going wrong in some of these places. So I'm going to quickly run through guaranteed income, kind of what it is, make sure everyone's on the same page about this as a policy, and then to ask some questions about each of the different stages of data analysis, thinking about some examples from the guaranteed income space and ways that interrogating how we're asking, what we're asking, and the sense that we make of that data changes a little bit how we look at the outcomes. And one of the key pieces here is thinking about, in the US context in particular, I'm speaking, interrogating some of the long-standing historical narratives that exist about social policy. All right, so to give you a quick overview of guaranteed income, it's essentially unconditional cash. In the case of the pilots that I've been evaluating, it's cash provided to families monthly anywhere between 12 and 24 months. We've been doing evaluations at APT for 8 different pilots across the country, and with participants in the program of anywhere between around 110 to somewhere around 250 participants in each program. Each of those participants gets a monthly cash payment anywhere between $330 and $1,000 a month. So in some cases, quite sort of substantial, and for some of those families, that's doubling their regular income. We did different kinds of evaluation. I just want to make sure it's clear. There was mixed methods research happening here where we were collecting both survey data from the participants who were in the treatment group and those who were in the control group, as well as doing interviews with participants. So we could begin to interrogate what we're understanding from the survey data and what we're understanding from those interviews. And a large part of the effort, both in the work that we are doing, but also in the broader movement in the US in understanding the outcomes from guaranteed income, is really to interrogate some of the US narratives that exist about welfare receipt. Those narratives being that people who receive welfare are lazy, that they work less, and that receiving cash on a monthly basis is going to increase dependency on the state. Right, so we're sort of looking at to think about how do we take apart some of those narratives as we understand what happens as people receive cash. So in the context of thinking about this and thinking about the data and the questions that we ask, I want to start with just thinking about the very act of collecting data. It's dependent on us asking what questions we ask. We have to make decisions all the time as researchers about what questions we're going to ask in the survey. What questions are we going to ask in the interviews? And one of the key elements here that for me kind of raises some big flags for us to be thinking critically, right, about these hard facts that come out about results on a guaranteed income or other places, is what we saw in our surveys was we didn't ask any questions about parenting in our surveys. That was a big gap for us as we got into the space of doing the analysis and interviewing participants. Participants talked all the time about parenting and how important receiving cash was for them to be able to have time to parent, but not just that, to be able to parent in the way that was meaningful to them. They could go out and they could buy that little candy. They could say yes instead of no all the time. They were able to spend a little bit less time working so that they could show up at the school. They could show up at sports events. They could show up as parents in the way that they wanted to and the parents that they wish to be.
30 seconds.
Oh no. Okay. So that's a key point that I want to kind of make really clear here. The structure of the questions that we ask. Then the analysis that we do. Over the course of the research, we have seen that on average, we're looking at results on average across the field in the guaranteed income field. But as we started to dig in on some subgroups, we started to see differences for different ages, right? For families working in one of our pilots, we saw for those participants, cash helped reduce the barriers to employment. But for older families, they started to drop out of the workforce to deal with health problems that they were experiencing, right? So again, the questions in the subgroups that we look at matter for how we understand what the research is going to say. And then finally, my final point.
Hi, everybody. We should be wrapping up and transitioning in the next few minutes to the team project
Ignore that voice.
rooms.
Keep going.
If you need any help,
My
let us
very
know
last
in the
point
main
is
session.
then how do we make sense of the results, right? So a recent review of 4 large RCTs or randomized controlled trials that were done at guaranteed income pilots noted that there was no meaningful financial change for families. However, they did save between $800 and $2,000 on average across these pilots. Now, the interpretation of that as not meaningful change for those families is coming from the perspective of a particular economist versus a participant who may be living in incredible scarcity and where $800 in the bank is a lifeline to be able to pay for a car tire repair or car repair, to be able to have some extra money to get food on the table for their kids. So how we make sense of those results is also really important, and incorporating and having participant voice at the center of that is really critical to being able to, I think, understand how we make policy work for people. Okay, I'm going to pause there because I'm over time, and thank you.